Okey-doke. Okay, we are ready for our February Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. Welcome, everyone. Real glad to be here. And we'll start with a land acknowledgement. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Thank you. Do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest tonight? I'm seeing shakes of heads, so no. We'll move forward with the approval of the agenda. Everyone took a look at the agenda. I have a resolution resolved that the February 11th, 2025 Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee agenda be approved. Do I have a mover? Councilor DeFlavio. Yes, and a seconder, and that's Brian. So that's all in favor? Awesome, that's carried. We're gonna do the fun thing again where I just go between the two of you. Yes. Okay, awesome. So that's carried. Here, let me just organize my notes. And next up is a receipt of the previous minutes. So we all took a look at the January 14th minutes. So I have a resolution resolved that the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of January 14th, 2025 be received. A mover, Brian. Seconder, DeFlavio. Perfect. All in favor? Hooray. Okay, that's carried. Okay, next up we have verbal updates. Bianca's going to go first with an update on the 43 Main Street East designation research report. Go ahead, Bianca.
Thank you, through you, the chair. I know we passed a resolution at the last meeting that we would bring it back to this meeting to discuss, but I just wanted to share that since then we've received a bunch of new research working with Wayne and the team at the archives, and there's a lot of great things in there about Hugh and all his involvement with transportation and links to Grimsby Beach. So we really think it's important to capture all of Hugh Anderson's history within this report. So we just need a little more time to bring all that research. And then we also were able to take some new photos of the building from the street that kind of show it in its current condition. And then we also sent the registered letter to the property owner, and we are still waiting to hear from them. So that's just an update on that, and we're going to be bringing that to the March meeting for the committee to take a look at.
Thank you for that update, Bianca. So I'm looking forward to the new research and the photographs of the current building. So when it comes to the registered letter, so I know that since in January we asked to make contact with the property owners, I just wanted to ask if we don't hear back from the property owners, and maybe this is a question for the committee as well, like, are we comfortable still moving forward with the designation if we don't hear back from the property owners by March? I just wanted to get a sense of if that's okay, or if we just move forward because of, its precarious situation. Yes, Councilor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Chair. Well, if we send a registered letter and we acknowledge, and Canada Post acknowledges that the letter was received by the property owner, and we hear nothing back, then I think we can assume that they have no objection. I would still feel more comfortable if our staff had a conversation with the homeowners, discuss with them, the details of what the meaning of designation is, and all what it entails and all those things, because we don't want anybody to be surprised by designation, right? So we're not in a rush, I don't think, and I mean, unless staff knows something we don't. I would rather we find different ways to reach out to the homeowner, whether it's, trying to find a phone number that's on record with our tax staff or whatever means we have so that we can have that communication. If we still can't get a hold of them and we think it's important to designate as soon as possible, then let's do it. The research is already done. Most of it's already done. I know that you're going to put it all together. So whenever we get to that point, I think the designation process will be easy. It'll be, we have the meeting and we start the process. So it's whatever that meeting is will be the meeting that we designate, unless people are strongly opposed to it. But everything indicates that we will be pushing for designation once we get to that point. So I don't think we're in a huge rush. And if we get to that point where we are in a rush, then we'll bring it forward to, I would say, bring it as soon as possible to the next meeting. But let's hold off until we can communicate with the homeowner. We've tried to do everything possible to communicate with homeowners along the way, and I would prefer to continue along that path. Do we know why we're not able to communicate? Like, are they snowbirds and they're away? Like, I guess I don't really want to have that conversation on camera, because I don't want people to know if people are away or not, or any of those things. But I do want to make sure that we are communicating as fully as possible with the people that own the home.
Through the chair, I just from my experience, we've done 46 now, and we always hear from them. So sometimes, like, over the course of it, we send an additional, there'll be 2 more registered letters that go to the property owner. And sometimes it isn't until we actually send the formal notice that we hear from them. So I think we're going to give it another month to prepare the updated report. If we hear something, then we will obviously continue the discussions with them. But we still will be sending 2 additional letters for them to receive. And so every time we've heard back, and usually they participate in the designation bylaw portion. But we've also tried to locate a number. We haven't been able to, so this is really our only option. But we have to send another registered mail anyways when we do the NOID. So if we want, we can discuss it again in March, and then maybe we'll have an update. But it's kind of become like a standard process now that when we send out the first registered mail, we usually hear back from them. So that's just my experience with them, the designations recently, but I'll give it to you guys to make that call.
Thanks, Bianca. Anyone else? Yes, Brian, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. The letter that was sent, how long ago was it sent, and has it been received, or is the notice still sitting as unreceived?
Through the chair. So we've actually sent them 2 or 3 letters that aren't registered mail. This is the first registered mail one. And if they don't receive the registered mail, it comes back to the town, and we have not received anything saying that it wasn't received. So usually the post office reaches out to them, and then they have to confirm pickup of it if they can't deliver it to the house. Like, if no one's there to sign for it, you have to sign for it. So if no one's there to sign for it, then it goes to the post office and they contact you to come and sign it. It's typically how it works.
Through you, Chair. If our process is to send the 3 registered, let's follow process and then see where we're at after that. Hopefully, and to your point that sometimes it takes the final notice to get that. But I think if we were to have to look at this, if this is challenged and we didn't follow our process that we've used, whether or not that's a process that's written in policy, but if it's a process that we've followed, we have a hard time defending that we did something before that. I don't think that's what you're suggesting, but it's more further to the point of let's follow that process so that we're going along with the way that we normally handle these, even if normally we receive that information. Let's just follow that process to be sure that if this does get challenged at a later date, we can at least firmly say we followed our process and we did everything we should have done. And honestly, I mean, I know there's a genuine desire to get contact with them, which we should just keep on that path until we've exhausted those options. Obviously, we're not going to do that in perpetuity, but if 3 is the letter, let's do the 3 and see where we're at.
Through the chair, just for clarification, so we send 2 letters that are outside of the legislative requirements, and then the legislation requires 2. So in total, the town is sending 4 when 2 are required, if that makes sense. So the first 2 are not registered mail. We usually hear back, but the second 2 are registered mail, and that's a requirement of the legislation. So, yeah.
Through
Through you, Chair, I just wanted to add on to Bianca's point as well. The registered letter that we did send is stating that we're proposing to designate the property, but no action's been taken yet. The first registered letter that is a requirement of the Ontario Heritage Act is when that action is being taken, when we approve to publish that notice in the newspaper. So it might be possible that because no action was being taken in the last letter, they haven't reached out, and people usually do reach out after they get that first notice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This has been really helpful to further clarify the process. So that second registered letter is after the designation, or our oh my gosh, the committee's suggestion to a recommendation, that's the word I was looking for, goes to council. Council approves the recommendation, and then from that, there's the registered letter that says action will be is taken. Just to clarify.
Through you, Chair, correct. The letter that we sent registered this time was not what we would typically send registered. It was that second letter that just states, here's a copy of the report, and we would like to bring this to Heritage Committee. So that's what was sent through registered mail this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I appreciate it. That's good. So it does sound like we're taking extra due diligence with this property, which I'm glad to see. We've been doing such a great job communicating and being in conversation with these property owners, so I appreciate you taking that extra step. Okay, anything else regarding that 43 Main Street East? Okay, we have a verbal update then. Resolved that the verbal update regarding designation research report 43 Main Street East be received. My mover is DeFlavio and seconder Brian. All in favor? Great. That's carried. Okay, next up is a verbal update regarding our working group map. So just for an update, the draft of our Google map is ready. It's here, so that's exciting. I'd like to put it on the screens for us in a little bit. But I wanted to thank the working group members. We had Janet from the museum, we had Kate from Nels Manor, and Amy from the committee. I'll be a part of this, contributing history about all the properties on the map. And thank you also to Garrett for helping with the descriptions that we weren't able to make as well. So that's been really great. We also have photos to add. So this map will be kind of soft launched for Heritage Week, which is next week. There's a couple more glitches or kinks that we need to work out, but I'm really happy with what this version of the map looks like. And I also had a chance to meet with Sarah Sweeney, our Director of Community Services, I think is the department. But anyway, yes, Parks, Rec, Culture, all that stuff. And Sarah Sweeney is really excited about the map as well and is looking about ways that we can expand it. So they, Parks and Rec, they're doing lots of work on our parks this spring. They're improving Bell Park in Grimsby Beach. They're replacing the 40 Mile Creek Bridge. And so Sarah Sweeney is looking for opportunities to expand the natural heritage and cultural heritage interpretation of those parks as well. And is there a way to use this digital map to kind of share those stories? So that was kind of an initial conversation that we had, and thinking about ways that we can maybe move parts of this map onto something like ArcGIS to use story maps, which is this really cool it's a digital map, but it tells more of like a digital exhibit story, and it's very spatial. And if there's a way that we could use some of what we're doing onto a story map for a little bit more of like a polished digital exhibit map look. So there's opportunities, there's capabilities, so that's really cool. And with expanding the maps as well, there's opportunities to tell more Indigenous stories, more of those intangible stories that don't have, a tangible mark on a map, but we can share those stories in other ways using natural features, natural heritage features. So there's options for that as well. But I thought maybe we could get the map on the screen to kind of take a look about what it looks like so far. So we have, again, it's the Google Map version, so something that we're all pretty familiar with. There are different colors representing the different stories. So we have red for the Loyalist legacies, those early Grimsby stories. And if you click on some of those dots, they have some description, and some will also have photos as well. So there's the address, there is very short description. We tried to keep it within tweet form. So max, I think it's like, max 70 words. And we've played around, so you'll see some of we've numbered the Grimsby beach layers in hopes of kind of creating like a bit of a walking tour. So again, it needs to play around with it a bit. It's not numbered correctly, but it's playing around with different ways that users can interact with this heritage, whether they're looking at it through a map online or if they're actually like in the space taking a walk around about what's around. So yeah, any questions at this point or comments? Yes, Flavio, go ahead.
If you already mentioned it, I apologize. Do we have a date for when it's going to go live? Sorry if I missed that along the way.
Yeah, it will be going live for Heritage Week next week. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
It looks terrific. This is exactly what I envisioned when we discussed it, and I'm looking forward to passing it on to our to GDAC so that they can include it in their tourism strategy, because I think it's an important part. I think it's the most important part of our tourism strategy, actually. From a attractions perspective, this and community services with the parks and are the two main features, I think, that we have. I know the purpose of tourism is to attract money, but to attract money, you have to attract people, and I think that these are the types of things that attract people. So thank you to the whole team that was involved in doing it. It looks awesome. I think that similar to the walking tours I've done in other places, it's a really good starting place for people, and besides giving you a starting point, it also, as you're going from place to place, you notice all these other things. And the hope is that as people are going from place to place, they'll notice the restaurants and they'll notice the shops and all the other things downtown that are a reason to stop and spend some money here. But everything else aside, it's an educational tool as well. So thanks to everybody who did it.
Thank you for your positive comments. Yeah, it's exciting to see it up, and I'm excited to see how it's used by the community and by visitors, and then how it grows as well. Brian, did you have your hand up?
Through you, Chair. Amazing work. I'm excited to see this go live. Something there sparked a thought. Is there a way to track how many hits, I guess it would be, to that? How many times it gets accessed and people are using it?
Yeah, so good question. So on the back end of the map itself, it tells me how many viewers are on it. But the only thing with that is that it also tracks my views as well whenever I'm up there. But I'm hoping between having that and then also it will be living on the town website. And I think I'm not sure what the page will look like yet. I think it's just the Heritage Week page, but maybe it will live somewhere else after Heritage Week. But then we can also track how many people go to that page as well, and how long they're on there and what they link out to as well. So there's a couple options for tracking, but I'm also interested in that as well, and how it's used. But yeah, what it looks like from my end on the back end, all I can see is how many people view the map as a whole. So yeah, I'm curious about that.
Thank you. Through Chair. Is it just searchable through Google Maps? And that's my first question. I'll ask another one, just let you answer both of them. Is this something that's been done by other communities? Or is this a first, I guess, maybe in Ontario, if we have visibility to that at all?
A great question. So it is searchable now, but so I think if you were to look up Grimsby or mapping Grimsby's heritage or something like that, it should be able to come up. I think I made it live. In terms of, I would imagine that other municipalities have been doing this. I do know that like heritage properties have been mapped on something like Story Maps and ArcGIS. City of Burlington has an example, for example, of heritage properties. So I don't think we're the first, but it's still pretty cool. But thank you. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add about other municipalities using Google Maps or something like that.
Through the chair, I don't have any of those stats, but I do have an update at the end of the meeting to talk more about Heritage Week and some of the other things we're going to be doing, and then also explaining where that kind of link is going to live. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for your positive feedback. It's great to hear, and I'm excited, again, to put it live, share it with Grimsby, and see where it goes. But with that, no other comments, questions, concerns? Okay, we'll move forward with the resolution then. Resolved that the verbal update regarding the working group be received. A mover, Brian, seconder, DeFlavio, all in favor? That's carried. Great, thanks you. And we'll move to, we have 2 designation research reports this evening. Our first is 88 Main Street East, and it will be presented by Garrett, so go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Staff would like to note that all property owners have been informed of the proposed designation of their properties. Staff would also like to thank the Grimsby Historical Society for all of their contributions towards the preservation of the town's cultural heritage value, as well as Wayne Mullins from Legacy Research. We would also like to thank both the property owners of the designations being proposed tonight. They have been involved in the process and are looking forward to seeing the history that we've discovered as well. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 88 Main Street West be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. East, thank you. Staff have concluded that the property has met 4 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906. That's what we get for designating so many properties on Main Street West. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the house at 88 Main Street East has direct associations with significant people, activities, and organizations. The Edwardian dwelling was built for James W. Unwin, a farmer and merchant whose diaries are an important resource for understanding life in Grimsby at the start of the 20th century. The Unwin House was also the home of Lillian M. Fuchs, a British home child and nurse who lived in and eventually owned the house over the course of 61 years. The 1996 designation of the immigration of home children as a national historic event demonstrates the importance of home child history to Canadian communities, and 88 Main Street West is a surviving tangible link to this important part of immigration history. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because 88 Main Street East supports the character of the area and is an example of different types of structures being constructed during the 19th and 20th centuries. The wood-framed vernacular structure provides contrast against the adjacent Victorian brick houses along our Main Street corridors. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest and significant findings, staff recommend that the property at 88 Main Street East be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Garrett. Thank you. This was such an interesting report. Does anyone have any questions or comments regarding this 88 Main Street East? No questions. I will say, I think it's great. It sounds like the property owners have been involved with this. They sent pictures to the report, so that's great. And the history is awesome. I know we have a new student intern working on these reports, and this was really, really well done, meticulous research. I remember so James Unwin, I remember when I worked at the Grimsby Museum, the Unwin Diaries were like a whole thing. Like someone always had to be transcribing the Unwin Diaries. So it's just such a great resource for the town, and it's cool that the British Home Children's Stories also makes this really, really relevant and really valuable to the history. And it made me think that, I think this is a good example of when, of course, the architectural heritage of this house is also quite important, but when that intangible story is essential to the property and how that story really only comes out when we protect these houses and when we share those stories and kind of make them something to be celebrated. So I think that's interesting. The British Home Children's Story isn't normally a happy story, but this one has a happy ending with a little love story. So that was really nice. I do want to comment on the British Home Child section, though. I think it is important to maybe include a little bit more clearly in the report that those children were often vulnerable and often came from poor families. Often they were single mothers or orphans, to kind of frame that story within that these children had a really hard life when they were coming over to Canada. And Lillian's story, while it was a happy one, is very rare. And so I think it's important to kind of make that a little bit more clear in the research report so that we can celebrate Lillian's story a little bit more, given that it does have a relatively happy ending. It seems like she was respected by the family, and then she ended up marrying the son. So I think that's something to share or to celebrate. Any other comments? Oh, Councillor DeFlavio, go ahead.
I was going to be quiet for a change, but I do want to say that when we see the photos over time and how the town of Grimsby, or the former, what used to be Grimsby, has changed over time. So it tells the story of Grimsby. So to see the houses, without the surrounding houses, and then the houses when Orchard Parkway was built in the 1960s, and how it's changed over time and how Main Street has changed, it really, and with the farm, the photo with the farm in the foreground and the house way in the background, it puts all of these, it tells the story, but it reminds you of the different kind of, I don't want to use a Taylor Swift word, but eras of Grimsby. How in each period of time, and I'm sure that if you were to trace that history, you can find the different communities and the different groups of immigrants that moved to Grimsby over time, and how the surrounding areas were impacted by those groups. So I want to echo the chair's sentiments about how cool it is to see these. And I know I say the same thing every time, but I learn something new every time. And what I would love to see is I know that the Grimsby Historical Society has a Facebook page, but I love the retro photos, and in my opinion, there's not enough of them out there. I mean, I go down rabbit holes all the time, like where I look at these old photos, and I would love to see an archive of those photos, just the photos, so people don't have to go to the reports. They're so valuable, and they really tell people about the neighborhoods that they live in. So I think I would love to see that. If we could, I don't want to make it a make work project, but again, if we had an intern student in the future who took it upon themselves to map it, to put the photos into Google Maps as an overlay, so that would be pretty cool. So you could click on it and say, what did this house look like in 1925, 1945, 1968? All those things, the same way that the reports do it, but the reports require you to find the report online, and whereas if we could put it in a place where it's easy for people to find, or even just have a Facebook page or something that posts these things, I think it would be really neat. If you give me the raw images where I don't have to take them, because they get degraded in PDF form, but if you give me the raw images, I'll put one out there every day. I love them. Like, I do. And every time I see them, it brings me joy wherever I see them, whether it's, if you look at the Ontario archive, like there's Ontario photos, historical photos that I think you've used before of some of our more prominent historical sites. Every one of those is really neat, and your caption that tells the story is really cool for people to learn from too. So I just want to get that information out there. I don't want just us to be the ones that are reading it, and I'm sure Councillor Howe is enjoys seeing it too, but I think everybody should see this stuff, and everybody's not, because we're only, I'd love to think that there's thousands of people reading your heritage designation reports, but I think it's more like 10 people, dozen, that read it. So I just want that information to be out there, because I think it's valuable to the community as a whole. And I think it just promotes heritage, and it promotes pride in the community that we live in. And it reminds people of where we came from. So, sorry, that was a lot. Mostly what I wanted to say was yes to what you said.
Thank you for sharing. I completely share your passion for this. And perhaps that's a future, goal of the mapping project that we're doing here, right? We have all those photos, so there's options, and it makes me excited to think. Okay, any other questions, comments about 88? Yes, go ahead, Brian.
Through you, Chair. Not so much about the property, but maybe building off of Councillor DeFlavio's comments there. I was thinking similar thoughts, like going through this, it's almost, you look at the big plot of land, it gets subdivided, another family is on that plot of land. It was almost, you could feel the community being built over time. And it's even just today, in this day and age, as we see more housing going up in places, it's the community being built on those original plots of land. And I agree with the idea around some way of being able to use these as searchable, because every time I read this report, I'm always thinking, where's this relative into my home? And I'm sure other people be similar, because you see these old pictures and you want to look and like, okay, that's that property there, but where's my house? What part of that is my house in that picture there? So I like that idea. I had a question though, off of Councillor DeFlavio's comment around us being the only ones that read these. I forget, Bianca, you've told me before where these are housed. Like, could these actually be published and put in the library, in the museum, where they could actually be taken out, as opposed to, I think right now they're just online on the webpage. Like, would it be possible to actually have them be something that people could go, and like, being a student doing a research project, there's lots of great info in here. And I mean, I know that's been collected from multiple other sources, but certainly of interest, and you never know, someone's going to pick it up just because it's actually there in the library or the museum.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, this is like a big part of our plan, talking with the planning team. It's really important to us that these stories get told. Right now we have the drafts that come to the committee on through the minutes, but we're working with the archives to make sure that everyone's histories all line up and everything before that final draft report will be the final document. So once that happens, they'll all be uploaded to the website, and then we can reach out to the library and see if there's an opportunity. I think that's a great idea. I know there's a few, with the new official plan, the different documents that came from that, we got them bound and they're now in the library, so anyone can access them that way. So I think that's definitely something that we could partner up with the library and see, can we have a whole section where it's all our designation reports, because we're getting close to about 90 reports. So we would have a whole section where some of the older ones are not as long as some of the new ones. But I think it's a great resource for students, and I feel like everyone deserves to hear these stories and learn about their community. So I love that idea of putting it in the library. I think that's a great idea.
Awesome, that's really exciting. All right. We can move forward. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. My resolution here resolved that 88 Main Street East be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. A mover. I forget, so I'm just going to go with Brian first. And DeFlavio as my seconder. All in favor? Awesome, that's great. And that's carried. All right, and our second research report of the night, 24 Auditorium Circle. Garrett, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 24 Auditorium Circle be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 6 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the structure at 24 Auditorium Circle is a representation of the wooden framed cottages that were built during the Chautauqua Methodist movement during the late 1800s. The cottage's design is influenced from folk Victorian architecture. The structure at 24 Auditorium Circle is notable for the documented age of its additions and how little has structurally been changed since the 1890s. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the house has associations with the McKitchen, McMillan, and Osley Brook families. The cottage was built for John and Phoebe McKitchen of Hamilton, who occupied it as a summer cottage from 1888 to 1911. The McKitchens were prominent members of Hamilton's Methodist community and were well known in Grimsby Park. In 1870, John McKitchen established his own wholesale paper, bag, and twine manufacturing firm, McKitchen and Company, which operated the Ontario Paper Bag Factory. John operated his business for 45 years until his death. The paper firm was later sold in 1914 and has been in operation since under the name GT French. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because the historic dwelling at 24 Auditorium Circle is visually and historically linked to its surroundings. The cottage is a strong representation of the other surviving original Grimsby Beach cottages built by the Boslaw family and D. Marsh and Sons. The proportions, proximity to other cottages, style, and alterations are all compatible with the surrounding building stock. The cottage at 24 Auditorium Circle is historically linked to its surroundings and is one of the original Methodist campground cottages constructed in the 1880s. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest and significant findings, staff recommend the property at 24 Auditorium Circle be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. I did also want to add in, through the research of this property, and thanks to our intern as well, we have quite a few pictures of the temple in Grimsby Beach, but through the research of this cottage, we were able to finally pinpoint where those images were taken and use this building as a reference point of the surrounding building stock that's still there. So that was a great breakthrough in the history of the beach area. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Garrett. And again, this was a super interesting report. So many goodies in this. I could have spent all day looking at those photos, and I agree to be able to identify the cottage in all of the photos we have is so great to situate ourselves within just within the park where we are, and then also what we can identify around that house too, right? So I think this is a really cool resource. I know you were saying that through this work, you're kind of building a map of where all the cottages are, which is really exciting, and in the historic photos. Any comments or questions from committee members? Councilor DeFlavio?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. When I look at the current state of the house, obviously it's not what it would have looked like 120 years ago. And the report doesn't have any real images of the house itself we've got the aerial images that are very difficult to even, because there's a lot of tree cover there. It's very difficult to even see that there's a house on that spot. Do we have a goal long-term about what we'd like to see the cottages look like in Grimsby Beach, or are we just saying, let's designate them? Because over time, people have changed them, they've adapted them. It's part of the culture of the neighborhood it has become this sort of decoration and adding color and all these things. I haven't seen anything historically that says that that's what they were like in any way 60 or 70 years ago. And as a kid growing up, I don't remember any of that in Grimsby Beach. Now, my memory might be foggy. I didn't go down there a lot because it was kind of a scary area when I was growing up, but I wasn't allowed. But I guess my question is, do we have a long-term goal about what we'd like to see all of Grimsby Beach look like? Because I've been on the Heritage Committee for 18 years, and there was a time where we talked about having, traditional color palettes from 100 years ago that encouraged people, if they were repainting the house, to use these colors, right? Again, that is a contrast to what is the style in Grimsby Beach now. But if it's a heritage district, is our goal to return it to that, or to kind of encourage what we have happening now? And I'm not saying one is right or wrong. I think that I think it's pretty neat what has happened over the years there. But from a heritage perspective, what are your thoughts about what should happen in a district like that? Not that it's a district now, but we kind of see it as a whole, Grimsby Beach, right? So I'd just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Through the chair, I'll start and then I'll pass it back over to Garrett. So as a part of the Grimsby Beach secondary plan for the area, so Grimsby Beach has now a special plan that kind of is in addition to, we have our official plan policies, and then we have a special plan that goes further into detail. And through that process, we identified these really two strong values. So you have the rich, deep historical significance of the area, but then you have this amazing cultural movement that came through and really saved the buildings. And so when we were doing the secondary plan, it was important we balanced both. And so we never wanted to because if you think about traditional preservation, I always think of if we had an artifact at the museum, we wouldn't want to bedazzle it or enhance it that way. And so we never wanted to stop the art movement. But I think through the secondary plan, we've been able to balance it. And so it's we want to continue to encourage what's happening today while still using best practices for materials. So, the way they're fixing things to the building, we will work with them on techniques we can do so that it's reversible, so that if anyone wants to come back in the future and restore it to something else, they can do that. And I think that balance is important because we're able to have all of the layers. And I think Grimsby Beach is the best example of those layers, because a lot of people enclosed their porches and left original elements inside. And so as you peel back, you find different eras. And so I think that's part of the value of the community. And so we've seen Ford Cottage, for example, that it's been restored back to what it would have looked like originally. And then we have some of the other cottages that they have the original form and function of the Grimsby Beach cottage, but they've been embellished with different artistic elements. And so I think maybe through the storytelling is where we can show the clear line of where the historical elements are, where the art movement comes, and have a goal to incorporate both. And it's kind of tricky because we don't want to, in best practice, you don't want to falsify something that wasn't ever there. But part of that has happened with the movement. So I think it's just so unique that we're going to have to deal with it each property case by case. 25th Street, for example, I think the goal there is to restore it back to a time period where it had the open porches and things like that. And that's great for that site that, we have so much of the original elements. We don't have as much of the art movement on that particular site. So I think that's an easy fix for that site. And then for this one, we can see this is actually a really strong example of the art movement. So I think we want to celebrate that. So I think it's just balancing both and not, I think, trying to control what happens, because I think the natural and organic thing that happened down there is why we still have it. So I think that's just kind of my thought on it. And I don't know if you wanted to add, I know you mentioned colors and you might have some thoughts on that.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just to add on to Bianca's point there, the the Methodist campground has gone through so many shifts and kind of identity changes. So the current identity down there is this kind of painted lady theme that's been happening. So we wouldn't want to discourage that because that has become a part of the culture down there. Speaking to 24 specifically, when we designate buildings, we typically include in the bylaw of the protected attributes original materials. So for example, on this cottage, it has modern siding, so we wouldn't include that. On this one, we were really looking at like the form of the building. And we know that it has original porches on it that have been enclosed. So in the bylaw, we would list that as enclosed porches, just to kind of describe what's under there. So it leaves a little bit of flexibility for the building as well. And it's really just protecting what's original, which on this building is the form of it, as well as a couple wooden windows on it. Speaking to the color, we've had kind of a bit of a shift in the history we have in the beaches. It was believed that they were always very muted colors down there, but through speaking with residents who have been doing renovations on the cottages, they keep finding brighter and brighter colors while they're renovating. So it is possible that there was kind of an array of colors that were used down there at the time. Thank you.
Thank you for that question and then for providing that context regarding the secondary plan. I really respect the balance you're trying to make with the secondary plan, and I think it's also, a really unique planning tool too, rather than, because I know there's certain restrictions of a heritage conservation district that wasn't favored by the residents. So something like a secondary plan allows us to guide change, to celebrate the history, to keep that built heritage while still balancing the interests and the culture of the neighborhood. So I really appreciate that, the work that took into making that secondary plan. But that's a really good question. And, something that I think as these buildings evolve, like that story doesn't just stop at a certain era too, right? Like as the houses are lived in and the changes are made, some of those changes also then become part of the story. So I think it's an interesting question for sure.
Can I just add one?
Yes.
I was just going to
Bianca,
add
go
one
ahead.
other thing, because you brought up a good point of how we struck that balance with the secondary plan. And then the idea is like the original cottages that we want to stay, we need some type of demolition protection. And so originally we had done the register paired with the secondary plan because it was the perfect balance of both. And so now that we're moving into potentially designating some of these sites, I think it's important that when we're doing the bylaws that we're still allowing that flexibility. And so I think this is a property owner that wants to work with us, and like this will be a really good example of how we can balance both with the bylaw. But that's kind of like the idea behind the designation now, is like we're securing the buildings themselves long-term from demolition and, keeping these important assets to that neighborhood while having that secondary plan that's going to pair really nicely with that. So that's kind of like also a piece of the plan. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for adding that. Any comments or questions regarding any of that? And I think it is also worth noting that, again, it comes back to the conversations you've been having with the property owners as well. I know this property owner is interested in a report, and part of that interest also comes from the grant program that's now available. So I think it's also a cool sign of like, we have this program and it's becoming an incentive and kind of encouraging, or people are now interested in wanting to be designated, not just for the status and the celebration, but also the incentives that come with it too. So I think that really helps our case as we begin to designate places like Grimsby Beach. So it's kind of cool that people are now, just responding more positively, wanting to work with us. I think that's really cool. Anything else? Okay. All right, then we will move forward with the resolution. Resolved that 24 Auditorium Circle be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. Mover, it's Flavio. Seconder, Brian. All in favor? Great, that's carried. Fantastic. really, really interesting reports this month, everyone. Oh, I loved that history. Okay, we have an announcement for Heritage Week 2025. Bianca, if you'd like to share what we're doing.
Thank you. So each February, Ontario's communities participate in Heritage Week to celebrate heritage in all forms. This year, Heritage Week will be during the week of February 17th to 23rd, so that's next week. We wanted to invite everyone to join us as we celebrate the ways Grimsby's heritage is preserved and commemorated, and how exploring our past can inspire a brighter future. So to celebrate the week, we have a few activities going on. So maybe, Garrett, if you want to share the screen. We have these amazing postcards that are going to be at Town Hall, the Art Gallery in the library, and at the museum. They're free for all the residents. Come collect all 4 of your free postcards, and those will be at the participating sites as long as supplies last. We'll also be having a coloring table at the Grimsby Art Gallery with some other heritage buildings for the kids to color. There will also be a heritage corner at the library. And we've picked some books that are heritage related. And then there's also some more of those postcards at the library table. We'll also be posting on our social media. We've partnered with the Grimsby Historical Society and the Nels Manor Museum to share all these posts with the community. We'll have lots of stuff, a new post every day, highlighting all of the ways that our history is preserved. And then the map that our chair was talking about earlier was put together by the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee in partnership with Nels Manor Museum and the Grimsby Museum. And so we're excited to launch the map and provide the community with an opportunity to explore Grimsby's heritage sites. There will be a webpage on the town website highlighting all of these events and activities that are going on, and the map will be linked on there as well. And then I also wanted to add that the Grimsby planning team will be partnering again with Willowbank, Canada's premier conservation school, to restore artifacts from the Grimsby Museum. This year we'll be restoring a roll-top desk that was used by an owner of a basket factory. We'll also be restoring 3 travel trunks, and we will be repairing, cleaning, and preserving a colored glass transom. And we are also hoping to make some advancement on the repair of a stained glass window from the Boys Tabernacle from Grimsby Beach. The website will also have additional resources for books and local history that you can access, and links to all of the town's websites and our partners for you to learn more about the preservation of the preservation of history in Grimsby. Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. Lots going on. That's exciting. Lots to celebrate. I'm excited to see all of that online. The restoration project with Willowbank are always super cool, so I hope that we'll get some pictures of that. And I should also say it is Black History Month in February as well. And the Grimsby Historical Society, they're having Rochelle Bush come to the Livingston Activity Center on this Thursday, to talk about Harriet Tubman's life and time in St. Catharines, when she lived in St. Catharines and ran the Underground Railroad from a city not too far away from us. So that should be a good talk too. So lots of cool stuff happening over the next little while. So awesome. What time? At 7 p.m. It's $10 for non-members, free for members. Be a member of the Grimsby Historical Society. Yeah, I can definitely send that out. Definitely. Yeah, it should be a good talk. All right. Anything else?
Oh, maybe I'll just add.
Oh, Bianca's going to add one more thing.
Yes. through the chair, just to add, we will be having a social media post on it, but it's a little teaser for the new permanent gallery that's going to be at the museum. So just a reminder that that's going to be coming out soon. The new permanent gallery has so many amazing parts of Grimsby's history. So I just wanted to flag that so everyone can keep that in mind. And then at the art gallery, it's also the 50th anniversary of the art gallery. So they have a really exciting exhibit out right now. And that will also be noted in some of the social media posts, but we encourage everyone to go see it while the collection is out.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, Grimsby Museum, fun things happening also. All right. Thank you everyone for joining tonight's meeting. We'll call that a night.